we are going to start off at the bottom because there are 17 teams in the ACC. And so we're going to get through all 17 teams, just give my very high-level thoughts because I have gone a little bit more in-depth earlier in the springtime. And another caveat here as well before I get started. This is the only conference where you have different teams playing a different number of conference games because what we've seen earlier in the offseason is that the ACC has adapted to, okay, we're going to go from an 8-game conference schedule to a 9-game conference schedule, which sounds great because, you're going to get a better level of competition typically is how this is played out, right? Here's the deal, though. Because they have 17 teams in the ACC, it literally mathematically does not work out to where everyone can play 9 conference games when you have 17 teams in the conference. So you do have a handful of teams here that do play 8 conference games. Most of the ACC does play 9 conference games. So I think if you really want to get the math to work, they're going to have to add one more team, which they're already at 17. So that's absolutely disgusting. With that being said, though, if they were to add a team in the ACC, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, whether you're watching in the live chat or whether you're watching like after the fact. Like, who would you roll with, just in terms of who would you add if you're the hypothetical ACC commissioner to get to that 18 team, right? Team number 18. That's what I'm curious about here, right? But for now, we go ahead and get things rolling here, and we're gonna go ahead and start at number 17, the team that I think is going to finish last in the ACC heading into this season, and that is going to be the Boston College Eagles, okay? So Bill O'Brien coming in here, and listen, I mean, he did solid work at Penn State a really long time ago, right? And, really stabilized Penn State after what was a really ugly situation following like the Jerry Sandusky deal, right? Like that, just so inexcusable actions there at Penn State. He takes over after all of that took place and they had all of those sanctions, and he was fine back then, but he hasn't been a winning head coach at the college level since then, right? And he enters year number 3. 9-16 has been his overall record at Boston College, and they lost some talent too. They lost 4 players to the NFL. They lost Reed Harris and Omar Fordin, both to the transfer portal. Those guys were certified star players. They lost their starting quarterback and their starting running back. But in spite of that, I still think if there's any positives that you can look at with Boston College, I think that they could have an intriguing backfield. Mason McKenzie comes in from Saginaw Valley, played really well at Saginaw Valley last season. Probably should be the starter. Then they bring in Evan Dickens from Liberty as well, who had over 1,400 yards from the line of scrimmage. So there is something to be excited about. There's aspects of this team to be excited about. But holistically, here's the deal with Boston College. I do not think that they have a very good coaching staff. I have Bill O'Brien as arguably one of the worst coaches in the ACC coming into this season. He was my 16th ranked head coach, so that's kind of how I feel about him holistically coming into this season. And then on top of that as well, they have one of the worst rosters in the ACC too. So, they do have an intriguing backfield tandem, Mason McKenzie and Evan Dickens. They also have a couple of pieces that they brought in from the portal that I think could be good quality pieces for the Boston College Eagles heading into this season. But I think that it's going to be a long season here. I do think that they at least win the FCS game, and maybe they can swing a couple of games here or there. But overall, overarchingly, I think this is going to be a long year for Boston College. So I have them going 1-11. They are also they are one of those teams as well that plays in one singular conference. They play one singular. Oh my goodness, I am having a complete brain fart here. I apologize. They play 8 conference games. That's really what I was trying to go with all of that. I don't know where my brain was at heading into it. But yeah, Boston College, 1-11, 0-8 conference record. They could, the Rutgers game is going to be a game to watch here early. That could be a game that they could swing early to build some early momentum. And then Syracuse at the end of the year, depending on how motivated Syracuse is. They do get the orange at home. If they get last year, Syracuse, that's definitely a game that they could win as well. If it's the Syracuse team from a couple of years ago, different story. So we're going to see what we get from that Syracuse football team. But for now, they are at Boston College is at the very bottom for me as well. They come in at number 17. Number 16, though. Number 16 ranked team in the ACC coming into this season, it's going to be the Stanford Cardinal. Now, one thing that I will say about Stanford is last year, it was kind of a gap year. It was kind of a year where you would go and try to find yourself, right? That was kind of what Frank Wright was doing, and he was solid from Nexus No standpoint, but he was never going to be a long-term head coach at Stanford. That was never going to happen, right? So now you enter a brand new season, and this time you do at least have a permanent head coach in place here, right? Tabitha Pritchard has been named at least for now, the long-term head coach of the Stanford Cardinal heading into this season. But what I will say about the Stanford Cardinal as well here is that Stanford is a team that is kind of in a year in which they're trying to figure out like who is going to be the foundational pieces long term. And you're also trying to figure out what you have as a coach in Tabitha Pritchard, who previously was the quarterback coach for the Washington Commanders. And he was fine in that role. He wasn't stellar, but it wasn't a disaster by any means, right? So maybe he could do something special here at the quarterback position. He's going to need to if they're going to surpass his number 16 ranking, because you're looking at, I believe it's Davis Webb, who's going to be starting for Stanford at the quarterback position. Again, kind of one of those you have, intriguing pieces. But holistically, they're going to need a stack of like 2, maybe even 3 quality recruiting classes / transfer portal classes in order to really get this thing running. I doubt that this is going to truly be a 1-year turnaround. So kind of view them in a similar light as the Boston College Eagles, who are right behind them. But the difference is for me, is that Stanford at least has some kind of direction. It's just that you're really not expecting much from them this upcoming season. It's a matter of, can you find those pieces that are going to help you down the line? That's really what I'm kind of looking at here in terms of what I see in the Stanford Cardinal as well. So we'll see if that happens. They have a toss-up game early against Hawaii. This time it is at home, and I do think what's going to help Stanford is that they are going to be better at the line of scrimmage, so I think they win that game. They also host Elon in the middle of the season. I think they beat the FCS team, but don't see them really winning like very many games. They have one of the lower ceilings in this conference heading into the season. So 0-9, they win a couple of games in non-conference. You're kind of just trying to see what you have on your roster and then building off of that. More hope for 27 and beyond. Now at number 15. And oh boy, number 15, I already know I am going to start some fights with number 15 here. It's the California Bears. Now, before you go and run off to the comment section, and before you go ahead and run to maybe the replies, like on Twitter or on Buzzer, hear me out on this one real quick here. And this is why I'm not completely sold on this Cal football program. Holistically, this Cal program has a lot to prove because from a long-term perspective, Cal has been one of the worst programs in the Power 4. They hardly came in as a top 80 program organizationally in the country coming into this season. And you pair that up as well with an inexperienced head coach. I really like Tosh Wapoli as a defensive coordinator. He obviously did special things at Cal as well from that particular perspective. Here's the thing. It's a rough-looking program right now. And on top of that, you also have an inexperienced head coach. And kind of what I've kind of ran across in the last 48 hours is this is kind of my P4 version of Texas State. Now, if you remember my comments as well about Texas State, is that they have a really exciting passing attack. They have a really exciting quarterback. They got pieces in the transfer portal that are going to help them tremendously in terms of offensive firepower. Chase Hendricks and Ian Strong, that's a very deadly duo. Dorian Thomas from New Mexico is a really nice add as well. And then you also tack in Adam Muhammad. Like, that's a very dangerous offensive attack from a skill player's position. What else do they have, though? In all honesty, I have concerns about the defense side of the ball. I have concerns about the line of scrimmage as well. So a team that has some flash and has some finesse, but there's not a ton of substance to this Cal football team. And on top of that as well, they have to go and make multiple cross-country road trips. They have to go travel to Syracuse like for a cross-country road trip. They also have to go play SMU, NC State, and Virginia. Very long road trips that Cal is going to have to make. That's typically does not bode well for teams that travel on the road. Teams that make those cross-country road trips typically do not perform well at all, right? So that's another thing that I'm looking at with this Cal football team. Now, I do think that they're going to win conference games. I think they'll win a couple of games here, but because of how I look at this like schedule and how they're kind of the Texas State of the ACC. I think that this is a team that is going to be incredibly fun to watch and is going to create some incredible experiences for like ACC after dark, I guess. But in terms of them being able to repeat what they did last season, I actually think that they take a step back here because of that. And because of that reason, I have them at number 15. Now at number 14, getting ready to get into number 14 now. So this team was a little bit tougher for me to rank, to be honest with you, because I don't know what we're going to see. Or I don't know if we're going to see last year's version or are we going to see the version that happened 2 years ago. And so what I ended up landing on is I kind of landed towards the prior, right? I ended up landing towards them as my 14th team in the ACC heading into this season. I don't think the ceiling is necessarily super high because there are some things culturally that I am concerned about the Syracuse football team heading into this season, because this team had an incredibly fast start in the month of September. And I think that's definitely possible for them yet again. I actually think that they could start the year 3-1, and it would be a solid start for them. But here's the thing. After Steve Angeli went down with that injury, they completely collapsed as a football team. And yes, they had other injuries, but to fall apart that badly and to not even be that competitive, to be honest with you, that is a serious red flag for me. I'm going to be completely honest with you there, right? So how tough are they? Like, it's really what I'm kind of trying to allude to here. Like, how tough are they as a football team? That is the biggest question. Like, how is their ability to deal with adversity? That's what I'm asking here. They do have a really good punter in Jack Stonehouse. I think he's one of the best punters in the conference, so I'm not worried about their special teams. They did address the backup quarterback room, so if Steve Angeli goes down, you add Amari Odom, who I would personally have as at least QB2, led Kennesaw State to a conference title last season. And then you also have Malachi Nelson, who, has been a bust, but he is a former 5-star, and, maybe, he's a dart throw lad, and maybe you get that 1 in 20 to 25 chance that Malachi Nelson is able to tap into what made him a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. That could be in there as well. But I have serious concerns about this culture that is at Syracuse right now. So I'm kind of selling on the Syracuse Orange at this point. Same record as the Cal Bears. I had them also going 4-8 as well, with a 2-7 conference record. Difference between these two teams is that I do think that Syracuse beats Cal. So that is the tiebreaker for me, because Syracuse does host Cal. So I did give Syracuse that particular win in conference play. That's why I have them above the Cal Bears. All right. Moving on now to number 13. And one quick caveat as well. How I'm ordering these teams is based upon winning percentage as well within conference play, because these teams do play like a different number of conference games. So with that said, that's what I'm rolling with, because you would think they would go off of winning percentage or even like use the CFP rankings as a tiebreaker. They're going to go with a committee approach, which I think is dumb. But I could rant for that could be a whole show. I like to be honest with you. And I'm trying to get for the rest of these ACC rankings. But number 13 is going to be North Carolina, and man, what a missed opportunity that North Carolina had last season. To be honest with you, I mean, I didn't think last season that they were this particularly uber talented football team. But you looked at how North Carolina's schedule was set up last season, and you could have made a legitimate argument based on what they had on the roster that maybe it would have been like an Indiana type team from a couple of years ago, where we understood that the strength of schedule is not where it needed to be necessarily. But the ceiling for them, and I remember this vividly because it was my first year covering the sport, I had a ceiling of 11-1 for North Carolina. So there was a path with their schedule, even though they weren't a super talented team, that they could have snuck into the college football playoff as an at-large, maybe as like a 10 or 11 seed. That ceiling did happen for North Carolina last year. They weren't even close, obviously, right? And so now you get into a brand new season, and the schedule is a little bit tougher, right? They have one of the toughest schedules. They have the fourth toughest schedule in the ACC. Much more difficult than what they had last year. They go play on the road against Clemson. They play Pitt on the road. They play the defending ACC champions and Duke on the road. They also have Miami on the schedule. Louisville, who we just ranked in the top 25. And then Virginia on the road towards the end of the season as well. And Virginia didn't make it into the top 25, but they were really close too. So they have some really difficult games here on this schedule as well. Not to mention some of the off-field stuff. I mean, Bill Belichick, it has been made very clear that, he's not clearly as good of a college coach as he is an NFL coach. And part of that is probably well past his prime. And you got the description with the whole Jordan Hudson situation as well, which has been a very, very interesting situation to watch unfold right in front of our eyes as well. What I will say is, and here's another thing too. This was even with me thinking that they were going to have Taron Dickens, who I was pretty high on as one of those underrated gets from the transfer portal. They don't even have that either. So in reality, I could be a little bit more, I could be more generous than given what's happened to them this offseason. We'll see if they can figure out how to maintain focus. But right now, I mean, I just don't really see it. I think it's going to be another difficult year. And I think, unironically, this might be the best thing for North Carolina right now because of the fact that, if they finish with another 3 or 4 win season, that could be grounds to get rid of Bill Belichick. And, Pedge, I absolutely agree. And here's the thing too, speaking of TCU, the line on FanDuel right now is about 7.5. I could absolutely see North Carolina failing to cover and TCU doing what they did last year as well. They do have intriguing pieces. I did like a couple of the transfer portal position guys that they got, particularly from Richmond, Virginia. They got a couple of dogs from the FCS ranks, but I mean, again, it's talented individuals, and it's going to be a group of teams that think they should do something, but in actuality, I think they struggle yet again this season because I don't think that they deal with those distractions very well. And now, speaking of the great state of North Carolina, though, remember when we had one of the more fascinating conference champions in a long time, in spite of losing 5 games in the regular season? That is where, in fact, I am going to have the defending ACC champions. They do check in as my number 12 team in the ACC coming into this season. Here's the deal with Duke. What I will say is that I think that they have a really good head coach that I think is constantly underrated here, right? Manny Diaz has done an incredible job. 18-9 in his 2 years at Duke. Obviously, he's won 9 games 2 years in a row. He's won an ACC championship. He does also have the benefit of one of the better running backs in the conference as well, in Nate Shepherd. But man, what really kind of puts a damper on this Duke football team is that they were expecting to have Darian Mensah back. And that just didn't happen at all. Darian Mensah leaves for Miami in the 11th hour. He also takes Cooper Bricotti with him, who was the number one receiver on this team. They also lose Clayshawn Brown on the outside. And so you're left with Walker Eget, who has started a couple of years at San Jose State. And you brought in a couple of fascinating pieces in Javon Nicholas and Gerard Richardson, but those are not the same caliber of receivers that they had last season. Not on the perimeter. So offensively, if Nate Shepard can't replicate what he did last year, they're going to be in some deep trouble, heading into this season, right? That is kind of the reality. They also lost a couple of stars. I do think that they're going to be solid on the line of scrimmage. They are led by Justin Pickett on the offensive line, who's a third-team all-conference player. Same with Aaron Hall, who's a third-team all-ACC defensive lineman last year. So, in the trenches, I think that they're going to be fine, and special teams will be good. But, man, going from Darian Mensah, who's a top-5 quarterback in the country heading into this season, to Walker Eget, yeah, that's going to lead to a little bit of a drop-off here. And so because we have that drop-off, I obviously am going to have them take a little bit of a step back. So they are going to finish ahead of North Carolina. This is the first team that we do have that actually does win free conference games. They get to 3-6. And I think they narrowly miss out on bowl eligibility, unless there's obviously not enough bowl eligible teams. Duke is going to be 5-7, at least in my opinion. I do think that there is a ceiling where there's a rally around the flag and Walker Eget has a breakout season. This could be a 10-win team, and they could make it to the ACC title game. This is really the start of that group where maybe in a best-case scenario, Duke could make a run at to Charlotte. That is where that starts, is Duke is on the very, very low end of that here, right? So with that said, we're going to go ahead and move ourselves on to number 11. So what is number 11? A number team that was a really pleasant surprise last season. And that's going to be the Demon Deacons of Wake Forest. So first and foremost, Justin Dicker. He coached his butt off last year, man. I'm going to just let y'all know straight up. He was not playing around at all last year. He did incredible work at Wake Forest last fall. A team that did not have very high expectations heading into the season. And yet, in spite of that, they were able to parlay that into a 9-win season. They went 9-4. They end up winning a bowl game at the end of the year as well. And I think that there is a sneaky good secondary that's going to be in place here. They do end up bringing back, for example, Nick Anderson, who quietly is probably one of the best safeties in this conference. First team all ACC. Haven't really seen a ton of people talk about him, though. Same thing with Karen Prunty, who is going to be rolling in as a 13 corner. So I think this secondary, I think there's a really good secondary. I think there's a strength of this team. Here's the thing, though. They lost their best offensive player in Damon Claiborne. They did also add Gio Lopez, which I have some questions on as well. And then their offensive line, they got gutted in the trenches. So I am worried about their offensive line play and then losing their best interior defensive lineman as well. And a top wide receiver in Chris Barnes, too. So there's a lot of pieces from last year that are no longer on this team. Now, I thought they replicated okay. On Davis intrigues me. They add a few other pieces as well. I think they're going to struggle a little bit in the trenches. And while I do have a tremendous amount of respect for Jake Dicker, I do think that this is the type of season where you do see a little bit of a fall off, and they kind of take some of that step back, which it's still a solid season. This is the first team on this ACC record predictions that I actually do have going to a bowl game. I do actually have them going 6-6. They're going to win a few games in conference play as well. They're going to be a bowl eligible football team. They're going to get there. It just might not look as pretty as what it did last season. And now we get into the top 10. The top 10 in the ACC. So, first, let me go ahead and take a drink. We're almost halfway there. And we're not even living on a prayer yet. So, shout out to us for not living on a prayer yet. Oh, excuse me. Okay, so number 10 now. Number 10 is going to be where I have Florida State. And I was higher on this team like heading into this season, back in the springtime. But, the more that I sat back and thought about it over the last few months, the more skeptical I am about this Florida State team. I mean, with what happened to them in the last few years, first of all, like they got screwed, right? In 2023, they should have been a playoff team. The fact that they went 13-0 and they got left out of the college football playoff, I thought that was blasphemy at the time. I still think it's blasphemy today. But ever since then, it's like there's been this dark cloud that's been hanging over this program, and they just simply haven't been able to get out of their own way. That's been the MO of Florida State the last couple of years, and it's shown on the field. I mean, they've won half as many games the last 2 years as they did in that 2023 campaign. And so now you're coming in. This is your 7th year, and you feel like you're in for another reboot. And you added a lot of pieces from the transfer portal, and I think there's some good pieces here. Matter of fact, I think holistically, this roster is actually better than what they had last season. But at the same time, it just comes down to this. Kind of the same thing with Syracuse earlier, with the only exception being that I have more faith in the roster talent here than Syracuse. How mentally tough are you in your ability to deal with adversity? That's the thing with Florida State here. And I'm just not as sold on it as what I was if I was going to make this video or do this live stream 5-6 months ago. That's just where I'm at with Florida State right now. And so I do think that there is improvement. I think that they're going to win more than 5 games over the course of the season. There will be improvement, but I don't think the improvement is significant. I think that it's going to be, kind of like in the eyes of just like for most programs, like it's 6-6. It's an okay year. Nothing to really write home about, but it's not considered a disaster. I think that if they do finish, though, if they finish 6-6, that's kind of a worst case scenario because you do see the progress. But it's like, man, like, is Mike Norvell ever going to recapture his magic a few years ago? Like, it puts the Florida State brass in a really tough spot if this 6-6 type of season does happen here. And like, they got some tough games early on too. They play SMU early in the year, and they play Alabama on the road, and they're going to be looking for their get back after what Florida State did to Alabama last season. So that is going to be kind of what I'm looking at there, is kind of questioning that mental toughness, albeit there is more talent overall on this roster, though. But now we officially get into this top half. And now let's go ahead and dive into who I kind of have in the top half. And at number 9, that is where I'm going to have the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets checking in. And let me say this about Brent Key now. Brent Key has done a really nice job of really elevating this program over the course of his time in Atlanta. And it's kind of shown that Georgia Tech is one of those sleeping giants in terms of being able to like win here. And I think that they could have consistent success here. Here's the thing, though. Even though they have elevated from a talent acquisition standpoint, Brent Key has definitely proven himself as a head coach as well. They have to replace 5 NFL players. They also lose one of their better wide receivers in Isaiah Canyon to the transfer portal. And yes, they added like a Jalen Mbakwe, but is that going to be enough on the outside, especially when you're going to have an inexperienced quarterback in not Fernando Mendoza? Oh, no, I'm talking about his little brother, Alberto Mendoza. And if Alberto Mendoza ends up being like 80 to 90% of what his big brother was last season, this team is going to have an incredibly high ceiling, and they're going to be playing in Atlanta. And I do think that one of the calling cards for this Georgia Tech team, they're going to have one of the best special team operations in this conference. Aiden Burr comes back, and he was one of the best kickers in the ACC last year. First team all ACC he was. So you're replacing multiple NFL players. You're also replacing your starting quarterback as well. And here's another thing about Georgia Tech. They just have a tougher schedule. They have the third toughest schedule in the ACC. And it's not even just that they got to go play against the likes of Virginia Tech on the road, who's much improved, as well as Pitt, Louisville, and Clemson, who are, teams that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. I haven't even revealed any of those teams yet. You also have to top it off by playing Georgia at the very end of the season, who you saw from that Redshirt Sports top 25. That's a top 5 team in the entire country, okay? That's what I'm looking at with Georgia Tech. So tougher schedule, got some transition at key positions. Still, I think this is going to be a bowl-eligible football team. I absolutely believe that Georgia Tech, they aren't going to go anywhere necessarily from that aspect. They're going to go bowling yet again. I do think, though, that this is going to be a little bit of a step back year for Georgia Tech. I think that they go 500 in conference play. They do win 4 ACC games, and then in a non-conference, they beat Colorado. They also beat Mercer as well, and Mercer is going to be breaking in a brand new head coach as well. And so Georgia Tech gets to a bowl eligibility once again, but a little bit of a transition year because of that. 6-6 is what I'm going to have on Georgia Tech. Now for number 8. Number 8 for me is a team that I think definitely has some intrigue, and it's a team that I think is going to be a fun team to watch this upcoming season. It is going to be the NC State Wolfpack. I do think a couple things that are working in NC State's direction, right? I do think that NC State is going to be working with a really they have a really underrated head coach here in Dave Dorian, who's done a nice job with NC State ever since leaving about a decade ago to take the head coaching job. Was previously coaching at Northern Illinois, right? And then I think that they also have one of the most fun quarterbacks as well in this conference, CJ Bailey. Man, CJ Bailey, if you haven't watched CJ Bailey play somehow, please do so. CJ Bailey is so fun to watch, dude. The problem that I have with NC State and why I don't have them really in my top 5, or I guess kind of close to my top 5, is that I look at NC State, and my thing about them is they lost so many pieces. I'm really worried about that supporting cast around CJ Bailey. I mean, multiple guys left for the NFL. Their starting tailback left in the portal. Their 2 top receivers left in the portal. They also lost an offensive lineman, a really good offensive lineman in Jacarius Peak, who was guarding CJ Bailey's backside as well. So they added a few pieces in the portal. I like Victor Snow. I like a couple of pieces that they added on the defensive side of the ball. And I think Dave Dorian, as I mentioned, I think he's a solid head coach. Not a liquid, not a gas Ivor, but it's a solid head coach. And defensively, they're also anchored by Caden Forham, who's one of the best linebackers in the ACC, in my opinion. But because of that, I do think that, it's going to be the type of team that, albeit they're going to be maybe one of the most entertaining teams to watch this upcoming season within this conference because of CJ Bailey, I don't know if that translates to a lot of wins necessarily either. So for NC State, this is the first team that I do have finishing above 500 in conference play. They finished 5-4 in conference play. For that reason, this is a 7-5 football team. And originally I had them going 8-4. If this game was still going to be taking place in Brazil, I would definitely subscribe to the idea of them being 8-4. And I think that is actually a conference game this year as well. But again, because that game got moved to Virginia's campus, and I think that NC State organizationally is a better program than Virginia, I do think that Virginia obviously is the better football team. And I think because they're going to be at home, I don't think NC State can necessarily overcome that either. So NC State got them going 7-5 with a 5-core conference record. Solid season. Not a wiggle or a gas, but again, just a solid season. They're checking in at number 8. Up next at number 7, and we actually kind of talked about them a little bit. That is the Virginia Cavaliers. Now, here's the thing with Virginia: is Virginia a one-year wonder, or can they sustain success in the long term here? Because Virginia had an excellent season, and it doesn't get talked about that much because of the fact that while Virginia made it to the ACC title game and they would have went to the playoff, that they would have won that conference championship, Duke gets most of the spotlight because they were a 5-loss team that made it to the ACC title game and won. So they get a lot of the spotlight. But let's not forget about Virginia. They were playing in that ACC title too. Let's not forget that at all, my man. But here's the thing with Virginia. Outside of last season, Tony Elliott has struggled in his tenure, right? Looking at what Virginia has been, and I believe that they were, I want to say, an 11-win team. So I think they were 11-3, if I'm not mistaken. So outside of last season, Tony Elliott has been 11-23 in his tenure. That's not going to really get the job done. So I got to see if he is going to in fact, be a one-year wonder or not. I do think that, there is a lot of really high-level pieces here. First and foremost, they do return 5 players from last season that were on the All-ACC list that was on the Virginia Cavaliers football team last season. Then on top of that, they got deeper at the quarterback position. They got deeper in the backfield. They got deeper at wide receiver. So for them at number 7, what it barreled down to for me is I got to see Virginia kind of do it more long term. I don't know if this is like a one-year wonder. Still, I think it's going to be a good football team. And another thing that's really going to work for them positively is that Virginia is going to be one of the oldest teams in the country heading into this year. They have, out of their roster of 85 guys that they can have, Virginia has 55 players that are either 4th or 5th year guys. That is a lot of experience that's played a lot of college football. And they didn't lose a ton either. Besides Jamari Taylor and Trail Harris, who left to go, is now playing in Oklahoma, they do bring some pieces back here. And so I could see them absolutely shattering of this 8-4 projection that I do have for Virginia. I think this is a team that I think if the best case scenario does happen, I think Virginia can, in fact, in a best case scenario, be 11-1 and going into title game weekend, be in the mix to make the college football playoff as a at large. And what I think is also going to benefit them as well is that, in my opinion, they do have the easiest schedule, not only in the ACC. I actually think that they may have the easiest schedule in the entire country or two, at least from a Power 4 perspective. So 68th ranked strength of schedule. So there is definitely those additional benefits as well for the ACC. So they do check in at 8-4. I can absolutely see them winning more than just 8 games. A ceiling of 11 games does exist for this Virginia football team for that reason. But the thing is that I just love some of these other teams that have had at Virginia just a little bit more. And let's go ahead and talk about one of those teams that I like just a little bit more than the Virginia Cavaliers. And that is going to, at number 6, be the Pitt Panthers, who come in at number 6 for me heading into this season. First of all, you do have a little bit more of a proven head coach in Pat Narduzzi, who you can say what you want about Pat Narduzzi. He has won an ACC championship before back in 2021. So he does have that on his resume. On top of that, and I think this is going to benefit Pitt football as well, is that Pitt is going to be returning their starting quarterback, Mason Heisel, who's incredibly fun to watch. He took over in the middle of last season for Eli Holstein. He done so he's got him back. They also have some pieces that I think are really going to help him out tremendously heading into the season that they got in the transfer portal. Lavelle Wright from Western Kentucky, Malik Knight, who I think could surprise some people, former Catamount, Keelan Davis, who was an all MAC conference nominee for the Akron Zips last year. He joins this offensive line as well. Here's what I think is going to be the difference between Pitt being an ACC in the ACC championship and just having a good season. And that is going to, no kidding, be, hey, man, what are you going to be like on the defensive side of the football? That's really what I'm concerned about, especially the linebackers. I think their linebacking room is going to be a little bit on the thin side for me. Kyle Lewis leaves for the NFL. I've ever seen Biles, who is another really talented linebacker. He goes out to Texas. Not to mention Francis Brulu goes to Notre Dame, like in the transfer portal as well. So I'm worried about this linebacking room. I have some concerns about this defensive line holistically too. So what that means is I don't know if the defense is going to be where it needs to be to ultimately take the next step for the Pitt Panthers, and that is to make it to Charlotte for the ACC title game for that reason. Offense is going to be really fun to watch, though. The secondary could be sneaky good. Watch out for Kanye Thompson, who transfers in from Slippery Rock. And then also special teams. I think special teams could be sneaky good, too. Their long snapper got him in the actually scratch that. Kind of the opposite. Special team could be a little bit of concern too because their long snapper left in the transfer portal too. So that could be a little bit of a concern. Not as big of a concern that I have about the linebacking room, obviously, right? But still think it's going to be a good season. I think it's going to be a fun season of Pitt football. Don't get me wrong. I have Pitt winning 9 games. This is a 9-3 football team for me. Going 9-3. All of their losses, I think, do come in conference play here, though. So when you get into like the non-conference, I think they handle business against Miami of Ohio to start the year. Same with UCF. Same with Bucknell as well. Strength of schedule is okay too. Definitely have a high ceiling though. I think outside the Miami game, there are other ACC games that I ultimately have losing, such as Virginia Tech on the road and also Louisville on the road as well. Those are also winnable games here too. So that's what I got for Pitt, who now comes in at number 6. At number 5, as we go ahead and get into this top 5 here, that is in fact going to be the Virginia Tech Hokies, who check in at number 5 for me. Brand new head coach, albeit unironically, their previous head coach is still on his staff. Brent Pry. I might be thinking of somebody else, but anyways, he's back as a defensive coordinator. But in comes James Franklin, who takes over as the new head coach of the Virginia Tech Hokies. And let me just say this off the top: James Franklin should not have been fired from Penn State. I think that was a mistake, even though I understand that he did not win enough of the big games. But they took a really big risk, and they're going to need Matt Campbell to at least be at the same level that James Franklin has had them for a really long time, if not better, for that to work out. So it's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see if it works out for him. But I'm going to say this. He is a heck of a football coach, and I think we're going to see an immediate turnaround here to the point where we do see this Virginia Tech football team compete and be in the mix to make it to the ACC title game. And I'll say this as well about this Virginia Tech squad heading into this upcoming season. Man, he brought his really nice toys, some of his really nice toys, with him from Penn State, unironically. Eve Grunkmeyer, who started in the second half of the season last year, he is at Virginia Tech now, so got some starting experience there. Luke Reynolds, who I think is a starting caliber tight end, like in the Power 4, he comes there as well. Quayshawn Brown, you got from Duke too, and then you also tack in a few pieces from the G6 I think could contribute right away. Bill Davis from Louisiana, and some couple really nice corners such as Cam Chadwick and Jaquez White too, and Kamari Copeland, who was right there in the trenches. And what was a difficult year last season? Kamari Copeland is back. He was one of the best players on Virginia Tech last year. He was a third-team All-ACC guy. So I do think that the roster is a little bit better, but most importantly, their head coaching is better. Now, is that going to parlay to them going to Charlotte right away? I don't think so. I think a ceiling is there, once again, that they could, in fact, be one of those teams that does, in fact, make it to Charlotte. Again, I mean, I feel that about a dozen teams in the ACC, to be honest with you. But what I will say is I think Virginia Tech is going to be in the mix. Now, a little bit of a quirk here. They're not going to win as many games as Pitt, like just overall, right? I do have Virginia Tech winning one less game than Pitt. But why I have Virginia Tech ahead of Pitt is because of those tiebreakers, right? So Virginia Tech and Pitt are both going to be 6-3. And the thing about Virginia Tech is I think Virginia Tech does beat Pitt in order to get to, in my opinion, 5th place. And then the only game that they have losing in the non-conference, and could be a little bit of an interesting take here, but James Franklin does now have a history of maybe losing a game or two that he shouldn't lose. I do have him dropping the Maryland game here early. Malik Washington is a stud. I think going to play at Maryland, I think that's a little bit of a slip up there. So that's the only game that I have Virginia Tech losing in the non-conference. Still a good year, though. I still have them going 8-4 for that reason, and definitely going to be in the hunt. Speaking of teams that are also going to be in the hunt as well, come on down, the Clemson Tigers. The Clemson Tigers come in as my 4th ranked team in the ACC, or at least team that I project to finish 4th place in the ACC this season. Now, I kind of dogged on Clemson earlier, where I imagine that Clemson is going to be ranked by the AP poll. But at the same time, what I will say about Clemson is just because I don't think that they necessarily should be a lock to be ranked in the top 25 doesn't mean that they can't get there. In fact, I think outside of a couple of games, I think the schedule does line up pretty nicely here to where Clemson can still have a pretty good season. And organizationally, I do think that Clemson is the best program in the ACC if you're looking at what they've been like from a long-term perspective for the last 4 to 5 years as well. Because outside of that LSU game, outside of, like Cal on the road, I mean, Miami, you do play Miami, but you do at least get them at home in Death Valley. A lot of your toughest games in your conference slate, and that's like Virginia Tech that I think is going to be really good. Georgia Tech, I think, is going to be a solid team as well. Like those games are all at home. Really, their toughest road game could be the Cal trip. And even then, like I just mentioned it, I have Cal regressing. Florida State is a road game, and they didn't make a bowl game last year. Same thing with Syracuse. That's also on the road. They didn't make it to a bowl game either. Duke, yeah, they're the ACC champs. They don't even have their starting quarterback. I don't know who's Walker Egat's going to throw the football to. I just don't. So definitely has some questions that Clemson is absolutely going to have to answer here, right? They like what are they going to get out of the quarterback position, for example, right? Because Kate Klubnik, he's playing in the Jets preseason game as I'm speaking right now. Like, what do they get from the quarterback position? They also have a bunch of players that have gone off to the NFL. And so I look at Clemson, their roster might not be as good, but the schedule lines up. I still believe in Dabo. I still think he's one of the best coaches in the ACC. Fun thing about him, too, 18th year as a head coach of Clemson, he's won 9 ACC titles. So half of the time, it's literally been flip a coin. And depending on where that coin lands, that decides where Clemson wins the ACC or not. I'm thinking that this year, obviously, I don't think Clemson wins the ACC, right? But again, I think that this is a really successful year. I do think that they do bounce back. I think he's learned and he's reflected on what needed to change. And I think that leads to Clemson being able to have a nice bounce back year and get back to maybe not what Clemson was at its prime, but still a really good season, a really special season. I would even like go forth to saying for most programs in college football. So I have them going 10-2. They only lose one game in conference play. So I have them behind the third place team, and it's primarily because of the fact that the next team does play 9 conference games, right? And I'm going off of winning percentage as a tiebreaker for me, because that is what makes sense for me, right? So Clemson does come in as my fourth best team. I have them going 10-2 with a 7-1 conference record. Speaking of that third best team, and man, like it is really a coin flip here between this team and the team that I ultimately have playing in Charlotte. Number 3 for me did become the SMU Mustangs. Really interesting schedule. Well, actually, I'll get to the schedule in a second, but I'll say this. Rhett Lashley, heck of a football coach, dude. Incredible football coach. Rhett Lashley, I think, is the best head coach in the ACC outside of Dabo Swinney. Yep, I think he's the second best head coach in this conference, because look at what he has done since he's joined the ACC. He's been in the ACC for 5 minutes. He took them to the ACC title game in his first year, and in year number 2, he almost did it again. If they would have just beat Cal, they would have been playing for the ACC title, and if they were to went on and win the ACC after they hypothetically handled business against Cal, nobody would have blinked an eye about SMU being back in the college football playoff once again. They were very close to repeating that once again. And now here we are going into 2026. I think that they're going to be in a position once again. Now, they do lose their offensive coordinator. Casey Woods, he took the head coaching job at Missouri State. And I'm so happy for Casey Woods getting an opportunity to be a head coach. I think he's going to, maybe won't show right away, but I think long-term, Missouri State is going to be in a good spot. They do have an experienced quarterback in Kevin Jennings, but they do have to replace their starting tailback, because their starting tailback left to go play at Clemson now. So that was a big loss that they had. Other than that, though, like really isn't a ton of wholesale changes here. PJ Williams is back. I think the offensive line is going to be good. We know what Kevin Jennings has been. Yannick Smith, I think, is going to be a fun watch as well. Transfers in from East Carolina. This is what I think decides whether SMU goes to the ACC championship game or not. It's going to be that third game of the season that SMU plays. They go on the road to play against Louisville, and I haven't revealed Louisville yet. So when they go on the road against Louisville, even though it's very early in the season, it's going to be happening in mid-September. That game, I think, will ultimately decide. Looking back, the winner of that game goes to the ACC title game. I think that is exactly what happens here. And because of the faith that I have in Jeff Brom, I think Jeff Brom has like a good group, and I think that while I've had SMU and Louisville roughly on the same footing here, I look at SMU, and because of the fact that they go on the road, I have them ultimately dropping that game. Now, on top of that as well, another interesting schedule quirk with SMU is that they go on the road first game of the season at Florida State. And Florida State will have the benefit of playing a week 0 game while SMU is going to be fresh. So Florida State might come out a little bit sharper, and it wouldn't be a huge surprise if Florida State pulls that upset off on SMU either. So there is a world early on where SMU could start the season 1-2, and their playoff hopes and maybe even potentially their title hopes go down the drain as well. So other than that, though, I will say this. They do have one of the highest floors in the ACC. I have them, like, at worst, like I think even in a worst case scenario, like they're going to win at least 8 games. I have their actual record a little bit higher than that, kind of the same level as a Clemson. I have them winning 10 games. Again, have them ahead of the Clemson Tigers because of that 9th conference game, and they win that 9th conference game, finishing 8-1. They finish 3rd in the ACC, which means who finishes second for me? And who finishes second for me is going to, in fact, be the Louisville Cardinals. I really like what Jeff Brom is doing here at Louisville. I think he's got a really good organization. I think he's elevated ever since Scott Satterfield has left to take the head coaching job. The biggest question for Louisville, I think, is fairly obvious at this point. It's been drawn out. It's been played out. How much has Lincoln Kienholz grown since he played in the bowl game a few years ago, where he looked like a deer in headlights? Highly regarded by the Ohio State fan base. No dispute about that whatsoever. But the good news is that they're not going to have to rely on Lincoln Kienholz. They have pieces. Isaac Brown is back. He's one of the best running backs in the ACC. They're going to have a good defense, and with Clay Lubin back and TJ Quinn, who's also back as well. They also added weapons around Lincoln Kienholz to allow him the opportunity to be successful, whether it's Trey Richardson, Lane McCoy, Brady Foley. They got themselves some dudes on top of some additional help on the defensive line. Cohen as Stringer transfers in to Louisville too. He had 73 tackles and 4 pass breakups. Like they got some dudes like all over this roster. Again, the difference between, it's really going to come down to Lincoln Kienholz in terms of how far does the Louisville Cardinals this year, other than that, outside of what they have in like the quarterback position, I don't really have a ton of questions holistically about this football team heading into this season. And I think it's going to set themselves up for a good year, because I think, and we've seen this play out at the ACC Media Days as well, we do see the maturity from Lincoln Kienholz at the ACC Media Days, which is something that like Reed saw personally and what Brody saw personally as boots on the ground. What I think is also going to be an interesting quirk as well is that first game of the season. They play Ole Miss. We saw in the Redshirt Sports Top 25, that is a team that is going to have a prime opportunity to have a statement win. And if they can find a way to beat Ole Miss, and I think that game is a toss-up. And remember, Pete Golding, who I did give a little bit of a benefit of the doubt in my SEC head coaching rankings, he doesn't want to be a head coach necessarily either. So does that play itself out a little bit? Because other than that Ole Miss game, I genuinely think that they could win all of these other games that are on their schedule. They have the benefit of SMU at home. They have the benefit of they really avoid Clemson. They avoid Miami. You do have SMU, but here's the thing with SMU. You get them at home once again. Virginia Tech is not on this schedule. Penn is on this schedule, but you have them at home. And then Virginia is not on this schedule either. NC State, probably going to be your most adverse challenge, but I have them ranked number 8. You have them on the road. That's going to be your toughest game and maybe the biggest challenge over the course of the whole season. But with that said, I do have Louisville as my second best team. I do have them playing in Charlotte, but they're not going to beat the team that I think is like, it's hard to I don't love the idea that everyone else is pulling for this team, but sometimes if you want to be a contrarian, it actually does have to make sense, and it just simply doesn't make sense to be a contrarian in this situation. I do have the Miami Hurricanes as my ACC champions. I mean, what can I say? This is a Mario Cristobal team that's figured out how to win in November and into December as well. They had to go on a run in order to make it to the college football playoff in the first place, and they did. And then once they got there, they were a mean machine. And this year, it sets up pretty nicely for them to make another run. They have one of the weaker strength of schedules in the ACC this year. They got 2 really pivotal games that I think really does determine not only whether they make it to Charlotte, but huge playoff implications as well. They play they play Clemson on the road. They also play Notre Dame on the road too. That's another thing about this Miami Hurricanes team. I think holistically, they're probably going to drop one of those 2 games. I think that's what I would imagine here, right? But they are capable of winning every single game on their schedule. I think they do split one of those 2 games, and then the other 10 games on their schedule, beyond the Clemson game and beyond the Notre Dame game, they should be heavily favored in all of those other games. Now, thing with Miami, biggest question for them is not even about the roster. The roster is fantastic. Darian Mensah is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Malachi Toney is back, and Mark Fletcher is also back as well. They have stars all over the field. I'm not worried about any of that. I'm worried about whatever complacency sets in, because we've seen this last year. Even though Miami made it to the national title game and almost made it and won the national championship last year, they did have a couple of games, well, the Louisville game and the SMU game too, where they really should have won those games, and they didn't. So how do you avoid that aspect of it? That's really what I'm curious about, and that's going to be the biggest thing that stops Miami not only from winning their very first ACC championship, because somehow they not only haven't won the ACC since joining this conference from the Big East, they've never even been to the ACC title game either. It's basically themselves. If they can get out of their own way and play a focused, good brand of football over a course of 12 weeks, they're going to be in the ACC championship, and they're going to win the ACC too. And so not only are they going to do those two things, I do think that Miami, on top of obviously winning the ACC, because I have them at number one, I also have them on top of that going to the college football playoff. So I do have them as a one big league, but I think Miami has many of the tools necessary to try to make another deep run at a national championship. And Miami is going to be one of those teams where, if they end up winning the national championship at the end of the year, I would not be completely surprised whatsoever. So, quick recap here and what I have in terms of my full ACC ranking. So, Miami is at number one. They win the ACC. Louisville comes in at number two. They make it to Charlotte, play in the ACC title game, lose to Miami. And then you got SMU at 3, Clemson at 4, Virginia Tech at 5, Pitt at 6, Virginia at 7, North Carolina State at 8, Georgia Tech and Florida State rounding out your top 10 as 6 and 6 teams. Wake Forest also gets in at number 11, so 11 bowl teams. And then this is what I have for the non-bowl teams in the ACC. Duke is closest with 5 wins. North Carolina, Syracuse, and Cal with 4. Syracuse with a couple. And then Boston College outside of their FCS matchup as well. They don't win any other games outside of their FCS matchup. They are going to finish 1-11. And we might be looking at a different head coach out there in Boston, right? So that is my full ACC rankings.